more Bud Light-Dylan Mulvaney news. Apparently, quote, no one at the senior level of the company was aware of Bud Light's polarizing partnership with Dylan Mulvaney, sources close to the situation claim. The company is also allegedly pausing its marketing efforts and scrambling to implement a more robust process for evaluating future influencer partnerships. That comes after sales reportedly plummeted after the Mulvaney partnership. So
big emphasis on reportedly. I mean, a lot of this has been a social media phenomenon. Mm-hmm. There was a viral video of a it seemed like an alcohol stalker walking solemnly through a store talking about how Bud Light sales were down and how he's not going to be able to feed his family anymore. There is a lot of performativity about all of this. You covered earlier in the week, Kid Rock shooting cans of Bud Light in frustration with this Dylan Mulvaney partnership, only to endorse a brand of hard seltzer that reveal Caitlyn Jenner is a spokesperson of. A lot of inconsistency here.
But Caitlyn Jenner is a good transgender person because Caitlyn Jenner is a conservative, so it's different.
There you have it. There you have it. Look, I think that there is a really counterintuitive thing that's happening here with the Dylan Mulvaney story. I think there are aspects of this which are, I think, frustrating. The fact that she's become famous so quickly when there's so many trans people who have been activists and who've been in this fight for so much of their lives. It is a little odd from my perspective to have like someone who's just fully an influencer be foregrounded in this way and to get so many opportunities. She's apparently earned over $1 million since becoming this kind of advertising TikTok it girl. But the effect of the conservatives making such an example of her is that she is being paid more and becoming more famous. Someone posted a chart of the mentions of her name over time, and it is spiking like crazy right now. She's being Googled like 4 times as much as Joe Biden ever since the end of last month. And it kind of feels like the people who hate her the most are enriching her, frankly, by making her like the cause celeb for people who want to defend trans rights.
Yeah, there was a Matt Walsh tweet about that. Do we have that? What did he say? He said, so he was disagreeing with you there, but I think you're probably right. He said, I see conservatives on this site complaining that the right made Dylan Mulvaney famous. This is a lazy take, not correct. The left selected Mulvaney as their new mascot. Dylan Mulvaney was going to be famous.
The left did that, or did Bud Light do that?
Right. Yeah. Is Dylan Mulvaney some conservatives don't use.
Did liberals
I use
do
the
that,
word left very carefully because I sit next to you, and I understand the distinctions between liberal, Democrat, progressive, left, etc. I think a lot of people on the right, it's all cultural
But even
Marxism
that being
or whatever.
Said, are Democrats running Bud Light? Is it the Anheuser-Busch family left-wing Democrats, or are all of these
for all I know, they donate to Democrats, but
I would have double checked it, but I actually think that's not the case. I think they're very conservative. But I think that all of these business people are making decisions not based on Democrats or conservatives, just like all of these companies give both the Democrats and conservatives. They're making these decisions because they're business decisions. There are 330-odd million Americans. Some of them like rainbows on their beer cans, so they issue some rainbow beer cans. Some of them like, I don't know, fatigues on their beer cans, so they issue some fatigue beer cans. Some of the people who like fatigues are, random black fishermen guys in the South. Some of the people who like rainbows are gay log cabin Republicans in Illinois. Like, we cannot be so reductive with our politics at this point.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And it's certainly the case that it's building up Dylan Mulvaney's profile, regardless of whether it's benefiting Budweiser. And also, there's a kind of, like I saw Chris Rufo tweeting about this too, lamenting the inability of right-wing people to be vaunted to celebrity status the way a Dylan Mulvaney can be by mainstream media coverage, progressive media coverage, corporate coverage, et cetera. And that is a fact of life that does motivate a lot of conservative grievances with just the mainstream culture and elites and big business in general, is that increasingly we're so polarized that we have different. The two tribes live in different worlds.
Yeah.
Now, of course, right-wing people can be made into celebrities on Fox News or vis-a-vis the Daily Wire. There are these really powerful, impressive, well-funded, highly watched, read, etc., conservative institutions. They're just different institutions, and that trend has accelerated over time. They're different institutions. We have different.
Yeah, I think that is, and this kind of goes back to something we were talking about in an earlier segment, which is, what do we do about the fact that there are these financial incentives to have increased polarization if all of the major news stations are corporate run and are driven primarily by the profit motive? Is there a role for government-sponsored, taxpayer-funded public broadcasting that could ostensibly have different kinds of goals? It would have to be by design, there would have to be administrative protections built in, blah, blah, blah. But potentially that would be the hope of that kind of an organization. Meanwhile, and I would argue somewhat more substantive news on the trans front, North Dakota became the latest state to bar transgender girls and women from joining female sports teams on April 11th, with the bar on transgender athletes starting from kindergarten through college. This is from the New York Times. These new restrictions in North Dakota, signed by Governor Doug Burgum, came less than a week after the Biden administration weighed in on the debate over transgender athletes. The administration's proposed rule change would allow schools to block some transgender athletes from competing on sports teams that do not match their biological sex, but it would prevent the enactment of across-the-board bans. North Dakota's new laws and many others like it could be headed for a clash with federal regulations if President Biden's proposed change takes effect. Some legal experts say the federal instruction would override state laws. It's worthy to note, however, that there is no known case of a transgender girl even ever trying to join a girl sports team in that state.
So interestingly enough, the Obama-era Title IX guidance on including trans people in school environments made it very clear that, so they were interpreting this existing federal law that's 50 years old and say, which I don't think this federal law, Title IX, has anything to say on this issue, and you would need a new law to cover this if you're going to do it at the federal level. But setting aside that objection I have, they were interpreting this law to say that schools needed to provide, needed to allow a person to use the bathroom, locker room of their chosen, not of their biological sex, but of their chosen sex. But they very specifically stopped short of applying this to sports teams as well. That was under the Obama-era Title IX guidance. And I remember just regardless of how you think it should be, it seems so evidently not correct to me that this, again, 50-year-old federal law is saying you have to go this far on trans stuff and not this, it just doesn't. You have to come up with a new law to cover that. But
well, the reality is they have a new law in North Dakota, and that law.
Right, this is the state level. This is guidance to everyone in the whole country.
Yeah, I'm just talking about this. I'm just talking about the story. There's this new law at the state level that legislators in the state took the time out of their day to pass and prioritize in their agenda when this has never even come up in the state. And I spoke to Aaron Reed on my show last week about some of this legislation. And time after time, what ends up happening on the kind of a local basis, when it becomes clear that all these laws are meant to basically target one fifth grader in Utah, one kid in a state, and these aren't the kind of top level, I think, more substantive conversations about what to do in the Olympics, what to do in competitive sports, what to do in the scholarship, college, collegiate level, and things like that. This is a K through up ban. So this is saying, I mean, what is the implication of this? If there's, are we saying that the differences between a 5-year-old on a t-ball team, a girl versus boy, trans kid versus not, it requires this kind of legislation? Whatever you think about it, that's what's going on now in North Dakota.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think a conservative person would say if there's literally no one, as there's an example of this, then what is the objection to doing this law?
Yeah, I would say it's a waste of resources, which is something that I think you often point to. A lot of conservatives are very fiscally minded. But I think it raises the question, why is this a priority? And is this the beginning of something more? Again, there are literally hundreds of bills that have been promulgated, some of which would require genital inspections of your children.
Yeah. But you can't and brush that off when we get to the point. This is real. Laws that will require genital inspections of your children in the name of being anti-pedophilia.
and rush through because of fear of transphobia. Is that the end point of this? And why are we doing things like this when ultimately there's very few trans people anywhere, especially young kids who are really trying to even be on anybody else's sports team?
I would tend toward letting people, institutions, schools, teams, sports leagues, whatever, handle this on their own. I wouldn't presume to tell them how to handle this at the state or especially the federal level, so I would tend toward letting people work it out. I certainly think, from my own experience coaching like grade school sports, that there can be pretty stark differences in ability even at an early age. It's different in every sport. It's different at every professional level.
I played on a co-ed t-ball team, and nobody was concerned about my safety, I gotta say.
I'm not, and it's not a concern of safety. It's a concern of athletic ability and making.
You think
it
I wasn't
fair
You think I was a drain on my co-ed t-ball team because I'm a girl, Robby?
These differences, I don't know at what age you're doing that. These differences do come out at some point.
I was like 6 or 7.
At 6, they can all the little boys and all the little girls can play together. It's fine.
Well, that's the point. This band would not allow that.
Well, I wasn't defending the band, but there is an age at which there should be separation along these lines to keep it competitive, and we're going to erase the category of high-performing female athletes if we do this.
Sure, but a narrowly tailored law might be the best thing to get at that. So I don't know. We'll continue to follow these stories, all the legislation that's coming down the pike, obviously. More Rising for you right after this.